Well, thank you very much. That was very kind. It's really an honor to be here today. I look forward to sharing my journey and some important lessons learned. I want to try and share the top 7 things that I wish someone had told me 30 years ago before I started Ideal Lab. So first, let me give you a little bit of background of my journey to get here, and then I'll go into those lessons. You already heard some of the journey from Len, but I grew up in the San Fernando Valley. I went to Portola Junior High School, and I remember selling candy bars at the bus stop for 9 cents, cutting the student store price by a penny, buying candy bars at Save-On drugstores, 3 for a quarter, so 8 1/3 cents, making a whopping markup of 1 2/3 cents. But the students loved it, the kids loved it at the bus stop, and I made my first $400 that way over my years in junior high school. And with that, I bought myself a drill press and a lathe so I could start making things, because I was really, really interested in wood shop and metal shop in junior high school. And then when I got to high school at Birmingham High School in the San Fernando Valley, it was 1973, and we had that global energy crisis. And I don't know how many of you knew about this, but you could only buy, gasoline was rationed. You could only buy $5 of gasoline per day, and you could only buy it on even and odd number days based on the last digit of your license plate. And I saw lines down Ventura Boulevard just for people waiting to buy gasoline. And I thought even then, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to power our planet with renewable energy as opposed to things that are dug up out of the ground and unequally distributed. And I started out making some small little solar devices, solar concentrators, some kits and plans, and I took out ads in the back of Popular Science magazine and Scientific American, Popular Mechanics, and I sold them for $4 for the plans and $19 for the kits, and I sold 10,000 of them over my years in high school, and that was enough for me to pay my way through Caltech. So it was really, really impactful to me to see the beginning of first selling candy bars at 1 cent markup, and then my first taste of intellectual property, where you could think of something that you learned in school with your brain, make plans about it, and then sell that at a much bigger markup. I remember going to Kinko's to make these plans. I copied them for 25 cents, but sold them for $4. So I saw the value of intellectual property, even though I didn't even know what that term was back then. I still saw the value of using your brain to come up with something new that the world needs. I was very excited about that. Then at Caltech, I took engineering classes. I got really excited about audio because a lot of the seniors had these fancy stereos that I couldn't afford. But someone said, you could go make your own pair of speakers, use the student shop. And there were classes to help you learn everything about audio engineering, and I took them, and I came up with some new speaker designs. Caltech helped me patent them. And before I knew it, I was selling speakers to everybody on campus. And that was a business that I continued even through to my graduation. And I started this company called GNP Loudspeakers and GNP Showcase in Pasadena, where I sold those. And when I graduated in 1981, it was the month that the IBM PC came out. And I went to my Computerland store on Lake Avenue in Pasadena and bought a $5,000 IBM PC with 1 floppy drive and 128K of RAM and a green monochrome monitor, 80 by 25. And I thought that was unbelievable that you could get that for that kind of money, that you had your own computer, and began using it in my business, and then began learning how to program, and then began making software products. First, accounting software to help me run my business, and I began selling that. It was called CPA Plus. It was add-ins to Lotus 123. And then my brother and I came up with this idea for a natural language interface for Lotus 123, so we began programming that. And I actually remember raising my first $150,000 from customers of my stereo store. I raised 10 people, $15,000 each to raise $150,000 to be able to develop that software and take it to the Comdex show in Las Vegas and show it off. And I made that product. It was called HAL, for Human Access Language, but it was really a play on the HAL from 2001. And it was a natural language product where you could type in plain English sentences and it would activate Lotus 123. And CPA Plus was the first product, and then HAL was the second product that we showed off. And of all things, I'm sitting there demonstrating the product on stage, a little makeshift stage we had made in our booth at Comdex. And Ben Rosen, an early investor in Lotus, early investor in Compaq, walks by, sees me demonstrating it, can't believe how impressive that demonstration was, contacts Lotus, and I get a call the Monday after Comdex from Mitch Kapoor, the founder of Lotus, who says, I heard about this great product that you have. Could you send it to us so we could see it? I'm really scared about sending that product off to them. And that was my first experience even at hiring an attorney to help us Again, I found an attorney who was a customer of our stereo store who had bought speakers from me to help me out. It was Mike Levine from USC, and he helped me out to learn even how to get an NDA agreement in place, to share that with Lotus first, and then we flew out to Cambridge and showed it to Lotus, and Lotus got very excited about it and acquired our company for $10 million. So that was my first incredible, I was 24 years old, I had never seen anything like that before. My brother and I moved to Cambridge to go work for Lotus, learned everything about the software industry, stayed there for 6.5 years. We had a 1-year contract, but it was renewed for 6.5 years. We loved it, they loved it, and we kept on coming out with new products. And I would have stayed at Lotus probably forever because I really, really loved the experience there. But in 1991, my son started kindergarten. And I remember waving goodbye to him on the playground when he was 5 years old, thinking, wow, David, you're going off to school, and I sure hope you fall in love with learning like I did. I had that magical 4th grade teacher that made me fall in love with learning. I hope you have that, and maybe there's something I can do about that. And I just had seen the multimedia PCs that were coming out, the first CD-ROM PCs with Sound Blaster audio cards where you could actually make sounds out of a PC and play video on a PC. And I thought, you know, I think I can make educational software that will make him and his generation inspired for learning. So I want to leave Lotus and start that company. Everybody said, that's a crazy idea. You have such a great situation at Lotus. But I just was really passionate about it, and I really thought it could make a difference. And I left and started this company, Knowledge Venture. This was my son, David, at the time. And we raised our first venture capital from Sand Hill Road. We raised $2.5 million from More Davidow. Started that company and began selling the products. And then over the years, it was really, really tough times. But we had some great successes, but really, really challenging times. We grew the company, though, to about 250 people and about 25 million in revenues, and became the #3 educational software publisher. But most of all, we sold 20 million copies. So a lot of kids got impacted by this really positively. And that really, really made me feel great. We sold the company in 1995 for $90 million to Vivendi. And my brother stayed on. And I was smitten by Netscape IPO that year, in August of 1995, when there were now 30 million internet users around the world. So think of how puny that number sounds now, with 2 billion people always connected. There were 30 million internet users using the internet for about 10 minutes a day. And now there's 2 million internet users using it, 2 billion using it 10 hours a day, every waking second. But the 30 million users was so attractive to me because when we were selling Knowledge Venture products, we had to go through all these middlemen. We had to sell to a distributor, who then sold to a local region, who then had to sell to an Egghead Software or CompUSA. And there were so many people between us and our customer. And I was really attracted to this idea that with the browser, you could talk directly to your customer. You could have 100% response rate with your customer. You could learn from every one of them. I was always interested in learning more from our customers. We used to have focus groups at Knowledge Venture where we bring in parents, put them behind the one-way mirror, and watch the kids and the parents interact with our products. But we could only bring in like 10 people a week, film them, watch them, learn from them. But what about if you could talk to every one of your customers? That was so exciting. And I had all these different ideas for things I wanted to do on the internet, and I didn't know which one to do first. And that led me to try this crazy idea, start Idea Lab, where we could do multiple companies in parallel under one roof with shared resources. So it was the Netscape IPO that was sort of the inspiration. And no one had done a technology incubator or accelerator or anything like this before, so we really didn't know if that was going to work. It really was treated initially as a 1-year experiment. We raised enough money, $3.5 million, to do a 1-year experiment. It was 7 people. Each of us put in $500,000. And intention was $1 million of operating expense for the first year, and we would do 10 companies for up to $250,000 each. And then those companies, we wouldn't have any more money to put in them. They would have to raise money outside after that. So the $250,000 was just to prototype the idea, take it along, hire an initial team, and then try and raise some outside financing. So what my dream was, I actually modeled it a little bit after what Thomas Edison had done, where he had a laboratory in New Jersey. They would prototype lots of things, and then certain ones of them they would spin off into separate companies, like the phonograph or electric motor companies or things like that. I wanted to have it be like that, where we could experiment and only take the things that were viable and turn them into companies. And in 1996, this really was kind of unheard of. So I really had some very, very, really grateful for the people who supported me in those early days when this was a pretty wild idea. And we were looking for big problems that technology could solve. And anything where technology could be the differentiator was something we wanted to go after, and anything where we thought we could make a big impact. And we wanted to try and put all the things under one roof to help that happen. And what I had come to believe from the structure we'd come up with at Knowledge Venture and from seeing the success there and having everybody participate is that with the right economic structure, the right equity structure for all the employees, that entrepreneurship really unlocks human potential. Like you actually get people to do things that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Like your employees are up at night dreaming about how to make their own stake of success in the company, and that gets things to happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I think that's such a great way to change the world and make the world a better place, is to unlock that human talent, unlock that latent capital by getting the right structure in place to make it happen. And I've really worked hard to try and perfect that structure over the last 20 years, learning little details about how to make that work better. We tried to put all the resources under one roof. One other thing that I learned from the experience at Knowledge Venture was, as CEO of the company, probably 80% of my time was put on things that I considered a nuisance. Running, taking care of payroll and HR and rent and logistics and operations within the company and finance and all that. And only 20% was on the product, on listening to the customer, making the product better, worrying about the proposition. And I wanted to flip that. I wanted to make it 80% of a CEO's time could be focused on the customer and only 20% on the nuisance. So what I considered the nuisance. And I wanted to structure it at Idea Lab where we'd have the shared resources to do that for CEOs. And that would give them a competitive advantage against another company that did that, where the CEO had to worry about those things. So I really think it's a great way to take advantage of the ecosystem we have now in Southern California, the ecosystem of shared other partnerships of other companies, and getting as much help on your board and from other. I really learned how important having investors that can help you in the company is, so that they're helping you do some of those other things to take that load off of you as a CEO. But still, the load as a CEO is always lonely and challenging. But if you can even lessen it a little bit and put more time on the customer, I think that's a big advantage. So I said we were going to do 10 companies in the first year. Because I'm like a company buffet horde, I can't stop thinking of them. We had 12. I squeaked in 12. These were our first 12 ideas in 1996. And of these 12, we prototyped them, we found teams for them, and of the 12, 7 of them were able to get some additional financing beyond our initial $250,000. So 5 of them failed, 7 of them went on beyond that first year. Because of the success of those 7 that raised money the first year, we raised some money for a second year. We raised another $5 million to do a second year of Idea Lab. And then after that, we started having liquidity events from some of the companies in Idea Lab, so we didn't have to raise money beyond that. We were able to continue from liquidity events to today. In the period since then, we started 150 different companies. You heard this already. I'm going to just breeze through this really fast. And we helped the companies raise a lot of money beyond our money, helped the companies raise $3.5 billion. And we did have 60 companies out of those 150 that failed. And that's where most of these lessons come from. My most painful lessons come from those, but my most valuable lessons come from those. The companies that succeeded don't teach us that much, but the failures taught us a lot. And the thing we're probably most proud of is 10,000 jobs right here in Southern California. And we're talking about Southern California today. I think Southern California is the best place to start a company. I think the talent here is incredible. The college graduates that come out of the institutions we have here are amazing. The stick-to-itiveness of the talent, the stability of the talent, and the price of the talent. It's a much, much better bargain than other places elsewhere, and there's much, much more loyalty, and you can build a really great company culture, I believe, in Southern California. And there's such diverse talent from so many different disciplines. And I think that those multiple disciplines come together to form great, great things. And that's something that we can call one of the strengths that we have in Southern California. So I'm completely long on LA, and I love building companies here in Southern California. So now about my lessons learned. That gives you the story of the journey to today. These are things that I wish someone had told me that maybe weren't so obvious. Maybe they'll be obvious to you, but they were painful lessons to me. So the first one, timing. So I gave a whole TED talk on timing and how important that is. But let me tell you the 1-minute version of that right here. It's very important to be ahead of your time. That is how, as a startup, you can succeed. But it's also very important not to be way too early. You want to be early, but not way too early. If you're too early, the world isn't quite ready for what you have. Now, it's very hard to evaluate this. But here's how you can. And I'll give you some examples of companies of ours that failed and companies of ours that worked. You have to look at, are the other things in place that you don't control to help your company succeed? So, for example, if GPS wasn't available, and or hadn't taken off yet, but your application needs that you can't build the GPS system. You can't cause the whole world to move to that faster. So you need to wait for other things to be in place for your idea to succeed. So you have to take a very honest look at where things are on the technology inflection curve to make sure that it's right. So I'll give you some examples. After we had some early success with some e-commerce companies in the late 80s, I was trying to figure out where the next frontier was going to be, and I thought it was going to be entertainment online. And I think we were right. We were just too early. So we started a company in 2000 called Z.com. And I was fortunate to have one of our early investors in Idealab and a knowledge venture with Steven Spielberg. So he had put in $500,000 in Idealab. So I reached out to Steven Spielberg. I asked him, can you introduce me to people who might want to participate in an entertainment venture? He says he would. Ron Howard would. He knows Chris Rock. Chris Rock would. Adam Sandler. He introduced me to Adam Sandler. And I get them to all participate by putting in some money, giving them some equity, and starting to form an entity that is going to create really great online entertainment content. We start creating it. But at the time, there was only about 20% broadband penetration. It was taking off, but only 20%. There was no YouTube yet. There were crazy plugins you had to try and get to work in your browser to even watch a video. Weird codecs you had to install. I knew how to do it, but most people didn't know how to do it. And we made this great content that nobody could watch. A year later, we were running out of money. We cut the burn rate of the company down to survive longer. We had raised $10 million, but we cut it back. A year later, 2002, we ran out of money. The company closed. A mere 2 years later, there's now the Flash plugin invented by Adobe. So all of a sudden, YouTube can be invented. All of a sudden, there's flip cams, so people can record things easily. And broadband penetration crosses from 20% to 50%. So people don't have dial-up modems. And now it can be watched directly in the browser. So we needed to survive 2 years longer. Now, maybe we could have been smarter, stretched our capital longer, and we should have done that. But what we should have looked at was read those signals and those tea leaves of broadband penetration better. And looked at things that were out of our control with respect to our timing, and we could have noticed that. So now let's look at some other positive examples of timing. So Uber and Airbnb, which are wild, wild successes. They had two things going for them on timing that people often don't even realize. Airbnb, I don't know how many of you heard the sort of infamous story about how the founders went to Fred Wilson at Union Square Ventures in New York and pitched him on the idea, and he could have gotten in as the first round investor in the company, and he passed because he said, no one is going to rent a spare room in their house to a complete stranger. And they said, well, I think people will. And he might have even been right, but we were in the middle of a recession, and people needed to rent a spare room to a stranger to earn some extra money. And that was timing that was outside their control. And same thing with Uber. They're launching around the same time when they were able to recruit drivers very, very easily because people were out of work. There was a huge, huge unemployment that made people willing to take a chance on driving for this new company. And that, again, was timing that they could have looked at. I don't think they planned on that one. That just shows you how valuable luck can be. But it just shows you how looking at forces outside of the control of your company are very important to do, and to really be honest about it. And it's very, very hard to do, but it's very, very important to do. So I really recommend to entrepreneurs, and we try and do it with new companies we're thinking about, is the world really ready right now for what you have? And make sure that those things that are in your control, you can take advantage of. But the things that are not, they have to be in place. OK, number two, finding ideas. So I used to think that the idea was everything. I still love ideas, and I come up with them all the time. However, the idea isn't the only thing. But an important part of the idea, when we try and evaluate the idea, is have you come up with something that is somewhat contrarian, but also true? It's very easy to come up with something that everybody else is doing that is true, but then you're competing with everybody else. You need to come up with something that people don't quite know yet, but that you know that is actually true. So trying to find the nugget of wisdom that you have that other people don't quite have yet. And it's almost like what Ray Dalio says here. The consensus is already priced in. So to be a great investor, and I added the word inventor, you have to be against the consensus, but then also be right. Again, it's easy to be against the consensus, but to be against the consensus and be right is the hard part. So looking at your idea and trying to evaluate, does it have some of these attributes? That is a small new startup has disadvantages. It is small. It has few people. It has few resources. It has no brand. So you have to have something significant to be able to stand out. And I feel that if the idea has some of these attributes, that really, really helps a lot. Next thing I wish I had learned earlier, don't be dilution sensitive, be success sensitive. So as an entrepreneur in your company, you are betting everything on this company. And the cliche line is, would you rather have a smaller stake of a big success or 100% of nothing? That's the cliche, but I actually think it's true. It's not a cliche. It's so important to get success that it's really, really important to get the right partners alongside, compromise on valuation, take whatever you, and give much more equity out to your employees, to your partners, to everybody who's going to help you succeed. Because in the end, that's going to make it so much more important to have that digital one success versus zero failure than to have a little bit larger percentage. And I think People said that to me early on, but I don't know if I really believed it. And then I finally learned it, and now I abide by it. And I wish someone had drilled that into me much earlier on. I think I would have had some more successes. Some of those 60 failures might have been successes had we heeded this lesson. Okay. It's not a little bit about product market fit. It's all about product market fit. So this is really, really important. When I started Idealab, there wasn't even a term product market fit. I mean, I sort of instinctively knew that it's important to come up with something that your customers like, but I didn't really know this is everything. It is so hard to push a product to someone, and it is so easy to fulfill a product and improve it when people are pulling it from you, that iterating until you get product market fit, finding that thing that people want from you, that they only wish you could give more of it, and all you have to do is figure out a way to deliver that, that is the holy grail of success as a startup. And finding that is more important. And iterating till you get that is the most important thing. And probably in hindsight, it sounds a little bit more bland, but if I could have or if I knew this, I would have called it Iterate Lab instead of Idealab, because that's really, really what it's about. The initial idea is not the idea that it ends up being. You might have the general direction of the thing you want to do and the area you want to pursue and the overall problem you want to solve, but your idea is not the idea that's going to end up. Mike Tyson has this great line, which I never thought I'd be quoting Mike Tyson in Entrepreneurial Talk, but Mike Tyson, the boxer, has a line which is so true for this, which is everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And it is so true. You come out here with this whole plan of what you're going to do, and then you get punched in the face, and in this case, the customer punches you in the face and says, no, I don't quite want that. I don't quite want that exact thing that you had a plan for. And listening to that punch and adapting to it, and then saying, okay, why did I get punched? Why did they like this? And that iteration is the crucial thing that I think can make a company succeed beyond your imagination, but not listening to it and being so stubborn. And this is why it's hard as an entrepreneur, because you've got to stick with your vision. You can't compromise your vision and what you want to achieve, but you have to compromise your path. And compromising the path, iterating that, is the thing I think that I wish I knew earlier on, because sometimes I got so fixated on the plan of how I was going to get there and how it was going to play out that I wasn't willing to move that enough, and that's a big difference in success. Persistence. This is kind of obvious. I think I knew this. I don't think I knew that every company was going to have dark days. Like, I thought that there'll be some companies that are just, everything's great. That's not the case. Every company has dark days. And you have to try and, as an entrepreneur, you have to be the leader to convince everybody else in your company that we're going to make it through those dark days. But you think of the great entrepreneurs of all time. Walt Disney had such dark days. He was broke before he came up with the complete Hail Mary idea of making a full-length animated feature with Snow White in 1942, and that pulled out the company. And then he spent a lot of money and built a lot of things, but then he was broke again until he pulled out the complete Hail Mary of building Disneyland in 1955 and then turning the company's fortunes around. And Steve Jobs was kicked out of his own company and then came back to the company with like a week or a month of cash left in the bank, and then pulled out the Hail Mary of getting the investment from Microsoft to keep them alive. And every entrepreneur finds those, has those moments, and knowing that they're going to happen, knowing your plan, and having your persistence to make it through them, having the ability to detect the difference between when it's just a setback or when the market is telling you to give up. I don't have a magic formula for deciding on that. It's very, very hard, because we have had to close companies when really the market has passed us, or when we don't have the ability to execute on what the market wants, or we're just out of money and we can't raise more money. But knowing that there's going to be those moments and that you have to fight through them is a really, really important part I would recommend to every entrepreneur. And don't have anybody going into it thinking that that's not going to come up, because it's going to come up. And then being lean. So the lean startup methodology that's talked about so much, I really ascribe to. I ascribed to it even before it was a buzzword. I didn't know that was a terminology, the lean startup, but I was doing it. I was doing it out of necessity, not out of plan. I was doing it because, as I told you, we started off with low enough money that all we could do was put $250,000 in each company. So we had to do it lean. We had to take low salaries and convince people to work for equity and no pay, and all the things you have to do as a startup. But the lean startup is not about having no money. The lean startup is about making smart choices and having a hypothesis and doing the minimum test you have to get the answer to that question. And I think it's a really, really important way of applying the scientific method to business. It's very, very valuable. I recommend everybody read the book, and I recommend everybody use this. And I think, so when I was running Knowledge Adventure, we would make a product. This is, again, back in the CD-ROM era before the internet. And it was very frustrating, because we would make this product, let's say Jumpstart Kindergarten, and we would work on it for a year. Then we would get the gold final CD-ROM master that we want to ship. And then we would have to send it off to Indiana, where Sony had a duplicating plant. We'd have to order 10,000 CDs, so we have to test it really, really heavily, because if we make a mistake on all 10,000 CDs, we're going to have to pay for those and repackage them. We have to shrink wrap the software in boxes and pay $10 a box to get those all shrink wrapped and shipped to a warehouse and all that. Then we'd ship them to a distributor, ship them to a reseller, ship them to a customer, and it would be like 3 to 4 months before a customer would get them from the day we finished. So the first feedback we'd even get would be 4 months later. So even if we instantaneously could adapt, we only could have 4 turns on the product per year. And in fact, we really only have like 1 turn on the product per year. I was so excited about the internet because you could have faster turns. At that time, Compaq Computer also was the biggest computer company, but Dell was starting to eat their lunch. And Compaq Computer had 4 turns on inventory each year. And Dell had 52 turns on inventory. And it was incredible because they could make a computer, and each week they would use up their inventory and sell it. And Dell was crushing Compaq because they had 52 turns on inventory, and Compaq only had 4. And I realized that the way to beat someone in business is to have more turns on knowledge. It's not inventory anymore that you're shipping. It's how fast can you listen to the customer, iterate with that, and then ship something new or adapt to that. And if you can be doing that weekly, if you can be doing that daily, and with new software, you can make things that iterate and learn from every customer. That's the competitive advantage that a small, young startup with no resources can have over a big, lumbering, wealthy, rich company. Because the rich company isn't doing that. The rich company is protecting their revenues and worrying about keeping everything stable, and everybody's happy in their job. So the small company can win on turns on knowledge. And that's part of what this whole lean startup idea is that you can learn something faster than someone else and then deploy it. And I think that is a very important thing that I wasn't able to articulate it that way. I was thinking about it, but it became completely clear to me 10 years into Idea Lab that this is the way of the future, the way in the future startups can win. And then finally, I learned this one way too late, building a complementary team. So let me try and describe this, because I think it's very important that in a startup company, you build out the other skills that you don't have. That is, just like people talk about how diversity is an advantage, diversity not only, diversity of skill set matters as well, including skills that when I first started out after college, I was recruiting people like me, people who I liked to hang out with, people who had a very similar mindset, and that was bad, because we were getting too much of the same thing. And let me give you the specific example here. So let's imagine that there are these 4 caricature extreme skills. The E is the entrepreneurial skill, the P is the producer skill, the A is the administrator skill, and the I is the integrator skill. Now, no one person is all of those, is only one of those. So I'll give you, say, my fingerprint profile for myself. I would say I'm 100% E, off the charts. I think of things all the time. I'm always daydreaming about new ideas. I'm a little bit P, maybe 25% P, meaning producer. I can get things done. I can finish a product. I can ship something. I learned in college how to meet deadlines, how to study for my finals, how to cram, all that kind of. I learned how to do things also, not just dream. I'm a negative A. Administration and order and structure, I can't even stand it. So I'm like off the charts negative on that one. And on I, integrator, which is pulling people together, resolving conflicts, I've learned how to be maybe 10% or 20% on that. I used to be negative on that too, but I learned how to be positive on that. Once I learned that there even was such a thing as that. And that's one of my big lessons. I didn't even know that. But let me tell you how the life cycle of a company. So a company starts out, this is time on this axis, and it starts out with E. A company only can start with E. The A can't start a company because the A isn't thinking and dreaming about a company. The I can't start a company. The P knows how to sell and make things but doesn't know what to make. But the E is the dreamer and starts the company. And eventually the company will start, make some progress, but eventually it will fail and peter out if it can't get anything done. If it can't make the product, ship the product, get some revenues, do something, it will fail. So it has to bring in some P skill. That P skill can come from the founding team, but it can come from new types of people that you bring in that are good at that. Eventually, though, so think of the knowledge adventure story. I have this idea, I make a product, I start making it, but now I got to sell it. I got to bring in some people to sell it. I got to collect the revenues. I got to start getting make the payroll and all that. I need to get some A skill, and I got to get a CFO or a controller to start getting healthcare plans, getting those things in place. Otherwise, it'll fail too. Even if I get A in, and at Knowledge Venture, when we got to 250 people, we were starting to fail for a different reason. We were starting to fail because we didn't have any I, and these people in the extreme sort of hate each other's guts. They're all such different mindsets that they don't really get along. And you do need to get these people to get along. You have to learn how to have mutual trust and respect for each of those other things that aren't your talent. So you need to have some I skill in the company. And when the company was falling apart and my board recommended bringing in a CEO consultant to help me, the CEO consultant taught me what was going on. Like the problems I thought I was having were people working in silos, not talking to one another, groups not working. I didn't know why this was happening, and I just thought, let's just everybody work together. But I learned how you had to put processes in place to do that. And that really helped the company. And the extreme example, just to visualize these personalities, would be, let's say you're looking at the window back there, and there's a scratch in the screen. If the P were in the room, looking at that, they'd say, oh, there's a scratch on that. You know, right after this meeting, let's just go take care of that. Like, that's the mindset of the P. I see something, let's just go do that. Like bull in the china shop, let's just go do that. The A would look at that and say, you know, there's a scratch back there. What we should do is we'll make a form, and we'll write down each thing we see wrong, and we'll put the forms in chronological order, and we'll go through them in chronological order. That's just the way they would look at that. And the E would look at that and go, that parking lot over there, what are we going to put in that parking lot? Like, doesn't see the window, doesn't see the scratch, isn't thinking about that. And the I would look at that and say, I wonder what those three people are thinking. Like, is more thinking about the people, and how do I get them to work together? Well, when I heard that story, I never had thought that way before. I never thought about what are those people thinking. And knowing about what the other people in your company are thinking and how to get everybody to work together in harmony, that's a very important thing. So I would say, when you're first starting a company, you don't have to worry about this yet. You know, at the very beginning, you need this. You need E and P to get going. But very quickly, you're going to need A and I in your company. And it's a very, very valuable thing to have that. And one last thing, a bonus thing that I thought of before I was coming up here, so I told you I had 7, but I have an 8th one, is storytelling. So I realize that an important thing for a CEO is always, here's the main roles of the CEO: to set the strategy and vision for the company, to recruit the people to pull that off, and to keep the money in the bank so that it's possible. I mean, that's the top level what a CEO has to do. And to do all of those things, you really have to be able to tell a story. You have to tell a story about why are we doing what we're doing? How am I going to convince an investor to put money in? Why should these people work at my company and not some other company? And coming up with a story almost of inevitability. Like, why is this thing we're doing going to be inevitable? Why is this going to change the world, make a positive impact? And why is this sort of obvious with our insight? Why is that going to happen? And honing your story till you can make that work is a very, very important part of success as an entrepreneurship. You would think, why do we have to be a storyteller to be an entrepreneur? But I actually think it's a very, very important part of making overall success happen. So I've been very fortunate here in Southern California. Growing up in San Fernando Valley, getting accepted to Caltech, Pasadena has been incredible to me. So many people here have been incredible to me. Len, you've been amazing. Some people here from Idea Lab, Aaron Fike and John Waller, other VCs that have helped me, Karen Nordman, Rick Smith is here. Rick Smith believed in me really early on. Andy Wilson. Caltech has helped me so much. K2 is here from Neo Tribe in Northern California. He's betting on me in a new company I'm starting. My Idea Lab people here, Al Duncan and Tom McGovern and Alex Malecki, and so many people in Southern California have helped me over the years. I think that the way we win in Southern California is just a teamwork of all the people coming together, making really, really great things happen here that really can change the world. We really can make a huge, huge difference. I'm really, really excited about it. And I think it's the best time in history for entrepreneurship. I think that so many things are in place to make entrepreneurship happen. We have more money available than ever before. We have the whole world reachable. Like right now, if you have an idea that's important to a group of people, it used to be so many channels of barriers of distribution would block you from finding those people, but now the whole world is reachable. You could find those people in whatever pockets they're in with the right angle, the right story, the right marketing. There's 2 billion devices in the world, rapidly going to 4 billion. Everybody's always on. You can have permissionless innovation in so much fields. Permissionless innovation meaning you don't need to go get anybody's permission anymore to do new things. It used to be, if you wanted to innovate some payment thing or whatever, you'd have to go to Visa or MasterCard or to a bank. Now you just invent it. You can just push it out there. You can so many areas where you can just make your invention and let the public answer to it. And that's really, really exciting. And almost every business in the world can be and will be disrupted by technology. So if you have a new technology idea to impact a business that formerly wasn't using it, you've got the chance. And finally, and especially true about Southern California, there is an abundance of talent ready to join startups now. That was not the case when I left Caltech in 1981. There were people who I wanted to get to come work at my startups, And their parents would say to them, you're nuts. You're going to go work at a startup? You could go work at Lockheed. You could go work at Ford Aerospace. You're going to go work at some kid's startup? And I'd have to take those parents to dinner to try and convince them I wasn't some kind of pariah to get them to come to some crazy cult or something. And you don't have to do that anymore. If you have a great startup, you can attract talent if you have the right story, the right ambition. So things have changed. It's really, really, really great time to be an entrepreneur. Just have to have vision. I would feel so great if even just one tip of one of those lessons that I shared can help any of you make a more successful business. That would make me feel so gratified because I love seeing entrepreneurship change the world. So I'm honored to have the chance to share that with you. I hope it could be helpful. And thank you very much. You've been a great audience.